Welcoming into the show, Lin McCraw, CEO and managing partner at the McCraw Law Group. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe I'm just getting annoyed for nothing, but I felt annoyed and dismayed when I saw that the U.S. Supreme Court has now veiled an ethics code, unveiled an ethics code for the justices. What should I make of this?
Well, I read the ethics code. I wanted to see what was actually in there, and it's kind of to me, it's kind of frightening how little is actually in there. It's filled with shoulds rather than shalls, and what I mean by that is very often in ethics codes, you'll have that a certain person in a certain position shall do X, shall do Y, shall do Z. The shoulds are a little more fuzzy around the edges. And I mean, I can understand why they face some additional challenges because, they just face some additional challenges that sometimes they may need to make rulings in spite of having an appearance of a potential problem. But the thing that's more concerning to me is when I read it, there was not anything in there at all that had any type of penalty provision or any type of enforcement provision in that. So without an enforcement provision, it just becomes a piece of paper, a propaganda piece, for lack of a better term, because it's just it's more PR than it is an actual ethics rule, because there's no way to enforce it.
Well, the reason they're doing it is because they're under public relations type pressure by people who don't like some of the justices, mainly because of their political orientation, and so they're being pressed on things that they've done that I'm not sure are actually violations. And then on the flip side of that, you have the other justices who are left leaning. Those justices are not being called out for similar actions that they've taken. So it's either okay to have trips and gifts or to stay at someone's mansion or what have you, or it's not. And so if all of the justices are engaging in the behavior and no one has anything to say about some of them, but they're pounding the others, the whole point of this sounds to me like they're just trying to placate people who are unjustly criticizing them. But I mean, I could be wrong. I'm just going off of what I've read so far.
Well, I'm not sure that's exactly correct, because the rules of ethics are typically there to prevent people from either side of doing things that would be unethical, that might that have the stench of impropriety, you might call it, on there. Now, to be sure, there have been justices on both sides of the aisle that have had issues that would cause me to be concerned if I had a client in front of the court and the client on the other side had done things like paid for trips and that sort of thing. That would cause me concern if I was a lawyer representing another party. To me, this is really a left and right issue. This is a right and wrong issue, and right and wrong issue with our Supreme Court is, understand that they get their authority just really from their goodwill and the fact that over the last 200 and something years, they have grown in stature, because very often they stayed out of political fights. We're seeing them get in more and more political fights, and as a result, their stature has kind of decreased. And now, because of these financial issues that various justices have had, calling them more into account, I think they could go a very long way to fixing it if they would simply have enforcement provisions for these rules. In other words, give the rules some teeth. I know that there's at least some theory that Congress could enforce some rules. I'm not sure that would be effective, because Congress could say, this is your rule and we're going to enforce it, and the only enforcement provision they have is impeachment. And you've seen that, how we don't get to the point where we impeach everybody over everything all the time. I mean, it's just it makes a mockery of the entire process whenever that happens. So what would be more effective would be if they had a process in which if a justice was accused of being financially improper in some way, form, shape, or another, that they would have the other justices would take up the issue and make a determination and do it in secret. And then that issue, one of the things that I've been very impressed with our judges has been the fact that in spite of political pressure on all sides, that generally they uphold the rule of law. And sometimes it burns people on the right and sometimes it burns people on the left, but they generally try to uphold the rule of law. And this would be a mechanism to allow that to occur, regardless of whether the justice caught in the trap was on the left or on the right.
Yeah, I don't see it being applied equally. If the ethics rules are given teeth, then Democrat-controlled congressional bodies would persecute the conservative justices in an attempt to get them impeached and removed so they can change the makeup of the court. And I think that would happen in short order. And so having the ethics rules bowing to the court of public opinion on whether or not they have been unethical, we don't actually have anyone holding Congress accountable for their unethical behavior. We have a number of congressional members who have had unethical behavior, and they'll have a censure which has no teeth. There's just, I think there's so much impropriety going on, and the unequal enforcement of any rule or ethics, if there's a violation, any enforcement that is not equal, that doesn't hit any person who violates it, just further erodes the trust of the elected, the public and the elected officials, or in this case, the appointees on the Supreme Court.
I agree with part of that, and part of it I disagree with. The part that I agree with is that we should have equal enforcement. Absolutely, positively should have equal enforcement, and it shouldn't matter who it is that is not lived up to the standards. Regardless of who it is, we should have equal enforcement. That should mean the way that ever really happens, by the way, is when people on the left will hold a politician on the left responsible, and when people on the right will hold a politician on the right responsible. Until that happens, we'll get more of this gridlock, and we'll just continuing to flaunt the rules. That'll be what'll happen until we are brave enough as a society to say, look, I'm willing to hold my guy accountable, and you got to hold your guy accountable too. And that has to be what happens if we're going to be effective. Now, one of the things that I disagreed with is you said that it would be necessarily unequal enforcement by the Congress. Congress does not have to be the one to enforce these ethical rules if the ethical rules had the teeth in them that I was saying they should have. What they should do is have the court itself have a group of justices that were not involved in whatever the particular potential impropriety was, to look at the impropriety, to see if it has teeth, and then to make a judgment. Now, the judgment doesn't have to be with removal of the officer. You could have judgments that might reflect on not allowing them to sit on a particular case, or maybe a financial penalty or something along those lines. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, but there can be that mechanism put in place in which the justices can police themselves. But they chose not to do it in this document, and that's what's disturbing to me, is they had the opportunity to do it, and they chose not to do it, and they had an opportunity to do it in a way that would have been nonpartisan. If Congress gets involved in it, it will simply be partisan. It simply will, whether it's on the left or on the right. Congress switches all the time, from the left to the right. So we got to be careful. It becomes a whose ox is getting gored here, and we don't want that to happen with our judiciary. Like I said, over the years we've had a remarkably good run of luck of having men and women there that will uphold the rule of law, even if it hurts their own side, quote unquote. And that has to happen if the court's going to retain legitimacy. The court has to be able to hold people accountable, judges accountable, that don't live up to their standards. Now, I do think that this that this document's it's a first step. I think what will happen ultimately, there will be a public outcry saying, "Hey, look, if we have these ethics rules and they're not being enforced, we're going to have to force an enforcement some way or another." I do think ultimately they will get there, but like anything else with the Supreme Court, it's like a giant cruise ship. It takes a long time for them to make rules and a long time for them to change their traditions.
Well, I guess we'll see what happens. I'm concerned that since we don't have, it's just so politicized, everything is, and there's just no way I trust the process anymore. I know, I wish I could, and I know I'm not alone in that feeling, but I guess if this is our first step, we'll have to see where it goes. That was awesome. Legal expertise, we can't get it anywhere but from a lawyer.